early 2000s. You know, the time after the aesthetic of the 90s, but the time before the 2010s where you were just constantly random for seemingly no reason other than to be quirky. When you're in a lower class family, sometimes having fun is some weird shit. The early 2000s was such a weird, distant feeling time frame that when you have mental health issues already, it can feel really like a liminal space. It's both hazy and distant while still feeling really close and comforting. But do you know what we, or at least I, remember of the weird time frame of the 2000s? The random VHS tapes that our families just had lying around that we would watch by ourselves. At my family's house, between the VHS tapes and the DVDs, my grandma accumulated the most weird, eclectic collection of movies. Some of which I can't even really find that easily anymore because of how vague or old they are, and anytime I look them up, they're like over $100 for one copy. What I did notice about the collection that my grandma had, I am pretty sure she either bought them because they were familiar for her, or she greatly misunderstood what the movie was. Direct-to-VHS and DVD movies were, and still are, a really big part of the movie production process. A lot of movies that have a troubled production or just were created just to be made for no other reason than for money were usually direct to VHS or DVD. And part of the problem with these movies, especially when our grandparents would buy them, is they didn't realize how bad the quality of the movies were until you watched them. But sometimes these movies, while may not be that good in quality, are still really neat and really fascinating in how they were made and just how they looked. Princess and the Goblin was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid that my grandma had, that when I looked into it, it was just a really cheaply thrown together animated movie from, I think, Austria? And while it was not good, I still loved it because of how fascinating it was for me. Some of your favorite movies that live back in your head rent-free that you might have seen growing up might have been direct to DVD or VHS without you even realizing it. Transylvania 65000 is not one of those movies. While I do remember fondly watching the movie, it wasn't because of the movie itself, it was because I was watching it with my mom and my grandma. All of the fond memories I had literally had nothing to do with the movie itself, except for maybe some quotes, but even then, I liked those quotes because they became a joke between me and my mom. I actually hadn't seen the movie since I was a child, and I decided to revisit it to see if it was actually any good. It's not. It's really not. The movie is directed by Rudy DeLuca, who actually has a part in the film, which I'll get into later, and was released in 1985. The movie was made with roughly a budget of about $3 million and made about, I'm going to round upwards, and it made roughly $8 million back. However, apparently the movie was funded by the Dow Chemical Company. The chemical company funded this so that they could use frozen assets to get it out of Yugoslavia. Because the money all came from Yugoslavia and that was made with frozen assets, they had to also film it there. Because they had to film it in Yugoslavia, they actually utilized a lot of actual, Croatian actors from the area so that they could probably use as little of the money as possible. Okay, so I'm gonna try really hard to pronounce these Croatian and Serbian actors' names correctly, but I'm gonna warn you right now, it is probably not... It's not gonna be great, but I'm trying my best. One of the actors is Božidar Smiljic. as Inspector Perchek. There's also Inge Appelt playing Madame Morovia, and Sarah Gurgin playing a little girl named Laura. Oh my sweet Jesus, I feel like I am butchering this so bad. Sarah Gurgin is actually a locally cast actor, considering they had a film in Yugoslavia, that because of her age and she was locally cast, she spoke no English and they had to actually phonetically teach her her lines, which I think is actually really cool that they were even able to do. A lot of the background characters as well were also locally cast from roughly Croatia and just the surrounding area to just play the random Transylvanian townsfolk. Okay, this is where I get really frustrated. As a little tangent, I got very frustrated trying to research this movie. And it wasn't for similar reasons of when I was doing research for the stupid Winnie the Pooh horror movie where it was just all circular. It was because the Croatian actors, very notably Božidar and Inge, they seem to be very prolific Croatian actors that are very hard to find information for. As I kept researching, it seemed like the only way I could find information about them is if I maybe had a VPN to change my location and changing the language on my computer to actually be able to read Croatian. Otherwise, there was just no way for me to find a good amount of info on them. For Božidar, most of what I could find was just that he was in over 80 or 90 films over his career, and that he shared the same name as a young musician who was also Croatian. Finding pictures of both of them was a nightmare. Most of the pictures I was able to get of Božidar was just screenshots from this movie or other movies he had been in only within the last few years, and he in fact actually only died recently in 2018. Most of the pages for him just didn't have any info really besides hand-picked films he was in. There wasn't any really info about who he was as a person or anything. And the fact that finding pictures of him in of itself was a nightmare was really frustrating for me. Even Inge, I even, at least for her, found the tiniest bit more. But even then, it was nothing about her or who she is as a person. It was just hand-picked films she had been in. And the only other pictures I could find of her are of when she was really, really young as a performer. Inge Appelt is even still alive. I just really get frustrated when finding info about films or actors that happen to not be American are really hard to find info for. It's like a piece of media is being lost just because Americans don't want to fucking learn shit about foreign people. And it's really aggravating. I just really hope that in a few years, considering these two seem to be very prominent actors in Croatia, don't get lost to time just because they're not universally well documented. And I really, really wish humans would get better at documenting shit. On that note, let's get into this movie and how stupid it is. The movie begins and we see two reporters showing their boss a tape of a Frankenstein attack in Transylvania. And when we pull back from the TV to see who the reporters are, they are Jack, played by Jeff Goldblum, and Gil, played by Ed Begley Jr. Gil is the boss's son and somehow got this footage, but he does think that this will give them an exclusive story.
Transylvania, all right.
Where is that?
I don't know. It's over there someplace.
Oh, great, over there someplace.
In this scene, we see that Jack's character likes to think of himself as a, I guess, highbrow reporter that only wants to tell genuine news, no lies, no anything. And he doesn't think that this is even remotely a good story and doesn't want it to be his last story to go out on.
Crap. I love crap. I need crap. Crap is what sells newspapers. Look around you. Crap, crap, crap. Crap, 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 crap.
May I say, I have no problem with crap.
Good boy.
However, this also leads us to hear from the boss himself, along with Jack, admitting that this news source that they work for intentionally creates headlines that are blown out of proportion. So they're basically just a really shitty news source. The boss doesn't like that Jack wants to be a real reporter and basically tells them that if they don't go out and do this story, then they're both just fired. But I'm your son. And he replies, prove it. That's just such great parenting right there. So lovely. Thanks, 80s. This makes Jack's character very grumpy, and they both leave, admitting defeat and deciding to go get the Frankenstein. Frankenstein? And they go leave to get the Frankenstein. Jesus fucking Christ. They leave to go get the story. And as they're leaving, we see a movie-wide trend of Jack just mocking and berating and belittling Gil, which I can tell, especially based off of other movies I've seen, this was just a trend in the 80s of friends where one friend is just an absolute dick to the other one and they do not deserve to be friends. The theme song for the movie starts playing as they're traveling to Transylvania, and it is such an amazing sounding song, though when I looked more into it, it's a song that's a parody of a song from the 1940s. The original song is a song by Glenn Miller and an orchestra called Pennsylvania 65000. But the song apparently was so successful that they made a pun cover of it where instead of Pennsylvania 65000, it's Transylvania 65000. And instead of being a poppy jazz swing song, it's whatever this is. But as cover songs go, it's still pretty amazing. I would vibe to this at any point in time. When they both finally arrive in Transylvania, they both comment on how the town is nothing like a town in Fear like his dad made it seem, and they both agree it's actually kind of a cute town. As they're looking around where they got off of the bus, Jack sees another woman come off of the bus with her daughter, and it turns out that they're both American as well. So, he decides to take this time to try and flirt with her. The way he tries to flirt with her is by telling Gil to go play with the kid.
That kid. I don't want to play with the kid. She's not my age.
Play with the kid.
Why should I play with the... Oh, I know why.
This also sets up a trend in the movie where Gil trusts Jack for seemingly no reason. We'll have to make a counter for that, honestly. Yeah, that's a good counter. Jack goes to the mother while her daughter Laura goes to play with Gil and tries to flirt with her by fixing his hair in her sunglasses, which is just the most arrogant form of flirting I think I have ever seen. The mother's name is Elizabeth, and she is played by Teresa Ganzel. And she honestly is such a weird character to me, and you'll find out why in a bit. The two of them seem to have a little bit of a back and forth where he's trying to flirt with her, and she very immediately shuts him down, and honestly, it was great. I wish she had stuck with it. But sadly, because she's the love interest, even though she rebukes him, they're still love interests, and she's still being very playful with him during the whole thing. But she calls her daughter Laura back over to her so that they could actually get settled into their hotel. I almost said apartment.
Laura, I told you to stay near me.
Gil, stop playing with Laura.
Gil comes back, and they are now all in one group and are greeted by Mayor Lepescu, who is played by Jeffrey Jones. The bane of my existence now. It's also really sad that he has more notable things he's been in, like at bare minimum Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Beetlejuice, but when I saw him pop up, the first thing my brain thought of was, oh hey, it's Dad from Mom and Dad Save the World! Does my brain always go to the obscure? Mayor Lepescu mentions to them that they're having a wine festival tomorrow night, and that it starts and goes
Till the cows go home.
I never say that to you.
Never.
I say it once in a while, but I certainly don't say it anything other than a whimsical way.
They all go inside, and as Elizabeth is checking herself into the rather small hotel, probably because, you know, it's one of those stereotypical inns, her and Jack have a lot more flirting back and forth, and basically just her mentioning she's also from America and that she's gonna be there for a while, and I hate their pairing so much. Honestly, the amount he pursues her in this movie just feels so predatory and gross. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. The actress's voice also kind of sounds like she would be related to Jennifer Tilly. It's kind of wild to listen to, because they're literally not, but she just has that similar, like, vocal style to her. Once Jack and Elizabeth leave the counter, Gil goes up and asks the owner of the inn if he's seen anything weird or suspicious lately. The guy misinterprets to think that he's asking for an escort. Oh, God. Every single time he tries to reword himself, it just somehow perpetuates the misunderstanding and keeps the joke going that he thinks that he's asking for an escort. The scene is so long. He eventually caves and just says, I'm looking for Frankenstein.
Frankenstein. Yes, the monster.
Ah,
Jack shows back into the room, gets frustrated, and gets grumpy at Gil as they leave, basically saying that they've barely been in town and now they're already a laughingstock. They get into a taxi and travel to the castle that they're going to be staying in, and because of how grumpy Jack is perpetually, Gil tries to hype him up and saying, look how spooky that castle is. It's totally unsettling. And then they get up to the door, and there's payment methods on the door for credit cards. Totally spooky! Capitalism, the scariest thing. They knock on the door and they are eventually greeted in the weirdest way possible by Fejos, who is played by Michael Richards. You know, that guy. A lot of people, when I was looking at reviews, were acting like he is the best part of the movie, but honestly I think he's one of the worst. He was so aggravating. This entire beginning part of his scene is just establishing that he is obsessed with physical comedy and will not stop doing it at the guests. Which, for some reason, Mayor Lepescu shows up because he also owns the Castle Hotel and says that he just indulges him and lets him do this for whatever reason. Honestly, the bad physical comedy happens in this movie so ridiculously often. I'm gonna have to create another counter. Yeah, That'll do. I understand that he's indulging Feus by just letting him do physical comedy at the guest. This man is a terror. Don't do this to your guests. They head inside the castle and... Oh my god, why? Pace yourself, movie. This is too much physical slapstick. A minute hasn't even gone by. Once we're finally inside, everyone is sitting at a table and the mayor offers them some drinks that are made using like stereotypical mad scientist stuff, and he uses it for puns, I guess, because this entire castle is a theme hotel. The worst of its kind. Apparently, the mayor created this theme hotel to try and capitalize on the spooky reputation that Transylvania has had for decades. Eventually, as the scene plays out, we end up getting another character that is another servant of the hotel, Radu, played by John Biner. I really hope I can get these names stuck in my head. As we see him interact with everyone, we see that he kind of acts like a stereotypical Igor character and calls everyone master. But once he leaves to go to the kitchen to get things for them, he basically, in a way, breaks character and shows just how much he hates his job. Once he goes back to the kitchen, we actually meet his wife, who's Loopy, and she's played by Carol Kane, who is most notably known just for playing really weird characters, like basically characters in The Princess Bride and Addams Family Values, who are just wacky characters. And Loopy is no different. This entire scene is basically just a lot of back and forth, and on one hand, I want to add it to the physical comedy counter, but something about it just feels different to me, so I'm not going to. Basically, the purpose of this back and forth scene of him coming into the kitchen, out of the kitchen, and shit like that is basically just to show that he kind of lashes out at his wife a lot and just kind of treats her like shit for just genuinely caring and wanting to help him.
Editing Dorian here, there's a couple things I forgot to mention as well, actually. This entire scene was also just completely improv. Rudy DeLuca basically just told them, cut fruit and serve, and everything they just kind of did on their own, I guess. Also, considering another character that will show up later who is usually simped for, I actually wish people would highlight Carol Kane in this movie more. She's actually such a pretty actress, especially in this movie. And I actually really liked her when I was a kid as well, and I just never really thought about it. So, yeah, don't forget about Carol Kane, everyone.
When we are still in the dining room area, for some reason, Feus is a lot more fixated on Gil than he is Jack, and keeps doing his bits at Gil this entire movie, and is trying to get in this scene, trying to get him to smell things that are on the table for some reason. Jack finds this hilarious though, because he's a terrible person. Eventually he finally stops doing bits at him because the phone rings, so he goes to answer it, and then eventually gives the phone to the mayor because the phone call is for him. The phone itself is actually really interesting, and I'm assuming is part of the themed hotel, because every single phone in any room you see here has this specific phone, which is so weird to me because it clearly seems inconvenient. When the mayor takes the phone and answers it, he literally says, "It bit me." Why would you want a phone that bites you? Literally, who would mass make these? Were these, like, on commission? When the mayor leaves, we finally cut to Gil out and about, trying to do research for the sole reason they were there in the first place. To find Frankenstein. He soon shows up to the building in the video. It turns out to be an abandoned chapel of sorts, and as he's investigating, he doesn't seem to find anything, but as he's leaving, oh no! The chandelier partially falls. Partially. While he is gathering himself, we are introduced to Inspector Perchek, who is played by Božidar Similjic. I think I misworded that again. I already clicked out of the tabs. I'm sorry.
These old chandeliers have a tendency to give way.
I'm Inspector Perchek. A better question is, what are you doing here?
I heard they were having a novena.
Novena?
Isn't this Our Lady of Perpetual Sorrow?
No.
I must be in the wrong church. Excuse me.
And we see the mayor pop up and that they are apparently in cahoots somehow. We soon come back to Jack, who is on the phone, you know, the weird looking one, with Elizabeth, and is trying to convince her to go out on a date with him. He literally says, Laura will be fine on her own. I mean, like, dude, all of you are in a foreign country. Laura seems to be under 10 years old. You don't need to get laid that bad by forcing a very, very tiny child to be alone by herself in a new country just so you can bang her mom. The entire scene is basically just back and forth of him trying to talk to Elizabeth on the phone and Gil trying to come inside but having issues because Jack's ignoring him before Elizabeth just hangs up the phone on him, which, as she should, and Gil finally coming inside and relaying to him what happened to him at the chapel, which basically boils down in Gil's mind as a man trying to attack him, which wasn't even what happened. However, the things that he's relaying is also some other things that he found out, like a doctor who ended up losing his medical license and got transferred to an old folks' home. And as he's trying to give this information, Jack just treats him as an incompetent again, which he isn't completely wrong, but it's still fucked how he does it, and ends up trying to insult him, saying that he is just like his father, to which Gil covers his ears and goes, "Oh, I'm not listening." The scene is completely derailed when Fehus comes into the room to give them a note that he had gotten from a phone call, basically saying that a G-slur man. Oh my god, I'm glad the 80s are over. I know we still use that word, but I feel like we're at least starting to learn. God, I hope we're starting to learn. Just anytime I watch an older movie, especially movies from the 80s and the 70s, and they just use the slur for Romani people, I feel like I'm losing what little of my brain I have left. Anyway, they take the note that they get from him and get him out of the door, which leads to more physical comedy, which is just so tiresome already. But the note basically tells them to go talk to an old fortune teller woman that is in town. We get to them seeing the Madame Morovia, who is played by Inge Appelt, who is one of the other Croatian actors I was telling you about. And she basically plays it like a stereotypical whimsical fortune teller lady, I guess. And she basically tells them about a wolf man who terrorizes the town. Apparently, she had tried telling the police on numerous occasions, but just like them, they laughed her off. She basically tells them that she wants them to help her and to kill the wolf, because he is in immense suffering that she wants to end, because the werewolf is her son. After she gives all of this information, we do actually get a funny piece of physical comedy where she does this.
I sleep now.
You know what, since we have a counter for bad physical comedy, let's add one for good physical comedy as well. They go to the source that she was talking about to try and find this wolf man, and when they do, they start following him as he is stripping out of some clothing, not all, and making some really weird noises under the moonlight. As they get closer and closer, they start hearing more animalistic noises coming from a bush. So when they pull the bush apart, they see him, but he's not a werewolf. He just makes animal noises while having sex because he's trying to have sex with a woman in a bush. And he ends up saying, "Who sent you, my wife?" Which is the biggest red flag. Remember when I said that Rudy DeLuca has a cameo in his own movie? Yeah, well, this is it. He plays the... Remember when I said that Rudy DeLuca had a cameo in his own movie? Well, this is him. He plays a sex freak in his own movie. Yay! As Gil and Jack leave, very traumatized, they get back to Jack's hotel room and they basically just have a back and forth on how traumatized they are. And Jack tells him that he can go searching if he wants, but once he doesn't find anything, they can tell his boss daddy that Frankenstein has left the town and doesn't live there anymore. And then proceeds to leave to go on a date with Elizabeth. I can't believe that I have to put this warning in this stupid fucking comedy movie from the 80s, but a tiny bit of trigger warning for domestic violence that's played as a joke. They're on a date at a restaurant and Jack asks her why she is here with Laura. So Elizabeth goes on this mini tangent about how...
What was I saying?
Oh, you were running away from your ex-husband and this and that.
Well, I wasn't really, running away. It's just he keeps bothering me. He wasn't too happy when I got custody of Laura. Then it got violent. Do you know that I had to pick up a wine bottle and smash him over the head with it just so I could get away from him?
Bad news.
Oh, he gets me so mad. He acts like a nut when things don't go.
And this entire scene is played as a joke against Elizabeth as a, haha, this lady's crazy and has anger issues. When in reality, it's basically a scene of a woman talking about how she had to flee a domestic violence situation by using her own violence and voicing genuine frustration against her ex-husband. And yet, with this, because it's played as a joke, they literally have Jeff Goldblum's character pull a bottle away from her like he's anticipating her just hitting him with it. Why, 80s? Thankfully, the joke gets interrupted when a tableside band comes up and asks where they're from. So when Elizabeth says that she's from New York, they start playing the New York theme song. But as the band starts walking away, she basically does the same thing of, well, why are you in town? And he very reluctantly says that it's because him and Gil are searching for Frankenstein. To which she, rightfully so, mocks him for it, and then decides to get up and leave. We cut back to Gil, who is in his room trying to sleep, but is unable to once a mysterious presence comes into his room. And who's that mysterious presence? It's Vampire Gina Davis for some fucking reason. As she tries to get closer to him, he feels her presence and freaks the fuck out and starts screaming for Jack. Once Jack comes in, he starts making fun of him again, saying that it's an old castle, it makes a lot of noises, they're leaving tomorrow, just get some fucking sleep. Gil tries to go back to sleep, but does a stereotypical thing of searching behind his bed and under his bed and all those types of things before curling up under a really thin-looking blanket and shaking and whining. Sidebar, did anyone else have really weird ways of trying to, keep themselves safe from monsters when they were a kid trying to sleep? I have a distinct memory of the most morbid way I had tried to avoid monsters when I was a kid trying to sleep. I would lay in bed on my back with my blankets up to my neck, no matter what time of year it was, and trained my body to breathe as shallow as possible so that hopefully if a monster came and found me, he would only see a head. Because a monster's not gonna want to fuck with a decapitated head. What's the fun in that? Just me? Okay. Honestly, though, that was really good for future me when I started working in a haunted house and used that breathing training to act as lifeless as possible in my room.
Ah, Radu. Yes, master.
The next morning, Gil tries to go to Radu to ask him if he has heard or seen anything weird happening in the castle last night. Radu doesn't have any information for him, but in this conversation, Gil tries to get him to stop calling him master all the time, which doesn't end well, and so he just gives up and says, fine, master's fine. Gil eventually just completely gives up and goes to the dining room where he finds Mère Lepescu. Mère Lepescu is in the dining room eating a hard-boiled egg, but opening it with an egg guillotine. God, that sounds like a bad Clue joke. It was Mère Lepescu in the dining room with an egg guillotine. Anyway, Gil asks him if he has also seen anything weird happening in the castle, and basically asks if they are the only ones staying there at the moment. And the mayor says, yeah, you're the only ones here right now. We don't even open for another month. But when I first stayed here, I totally saw Dracula guy. Gil decides to head outside to get some more investigation done, and is yet again confronted by Faye, who's trying to do physical comedy at him. This is my nightmare. Though we do at least get some funny physical comedy from Feyhus, because as Gil's trying to escape him, fucking Feyhus just attaches himself to it.
You can do it! Hey! Okay, we run!
While Gil is finally gone, Lepescu goes to his room and tries to find the VHS tape that has the Frankenstein footage. He eventually finds it and leaves the room, telling Radu not to let anyone in or out of the room, and leaves. When Gil leaves, we see him go to the sanitarium that the one doctor apparently works at and tries to go inside, but is stopped by a guard saying that the doctor does not see anyone unless under an appointment. And so Gil tries to find another way inside, which leads to another actually really interesting bit of physical comedy that I kind of wish I saw the behind the scenes for.
Hi, ladies. Beautiful, isn't it?
We see Gil looking over the weird, stone fence and sees that there are a lot of patients working in the yard. After we see that, we cut back to Lepescu, who's talking to Inspector Perchek and showing him the Frankenstein tape, and basically showing that they have a problem. Gil apparently had finally gone to Jack and told him the updated stuff that he had found out, so they both decided to go to Lepescu and Perchek to tell them and confront them with everything that they have found so far. The conversation doesn't go well and basically just ends in, I can't remember which one says it, but one of them tells them that they should focus on happy stories of Transylvania, not bad ones. But as Gil keeps pressing more, he basically gets Perchek very upset and kicks them out of his office. As they're leaving, Lepescu makes a joke saying that he needs to lighten up. Considering all that Gil had asked is why a doctor that had a revoked license works at a sanitarium with such high security, and he was so not willing to talk about it, this actually finally gets Jack on his side to actually start investigating more. Because Jack is finally on board with investigating more, they both go back to the sanitarium again and have a little interaction of going up to the sanitarium to try and scope it out.
Get down! Get up. Get down. Get up.
The guard isn't here. Why'd you get down?
I got into a rhythm.
While they're watching the building, they see Perchek and Lepescu show up to talk to the doctor, which makes Jack even more curious. The two of them go around the back to try and get inside, and this leads to the second counter of Gil trusting Jack for literally no reason, and you can literally tell that he should not have trusted him.
What if this is electrified? Here, there. See, it's not electrified. Now climb the gate.
What if the guard sees me?
Just go!
He makes Gil put on a patient robe and climb over the fence, and when he's already mostly inside, he tattles on him saying that a patient's trying to get out. So a woman guard comes up and thinks that he's a patient and forces him to come further inside, which, like, obviously she thinks that he's a patient, so what was the whole point of tattling on him? Clearly wearing a robe and him being within the grounds was fine enough. Gil manages to find Dr. Malavacqua's office, who is the doctor who had his license revoked. To mention Malavacqua. Also, I got so fixated on the actor at a certain point that I actually forgot to write in my notes. The actor's name is Joseph Bologna? I know it's how it's pronounced when you talk about the food. I don't know how it's pronounced when you say it as a name. So that's the actor's name. But basically, in his office, he sees Malavacqua talking to Lepescu and Perchek, talking about how there are two reporters that are asking way too many questions, and that the questions they are asking them about sounds awfully similar to a man who supposedly died under his care named Hunyadi. Malavacqua, however, confirms that Hunyadi is in fact dead and shows him his medical records to prove that he's dead. This thankfully gets him out of his hair for now, to which, after they leave his office, he calls the castle and asks Fejos to put Radu on the phone. Once Radu gets on the phone, Malavacqua tells him that he needs to meet him in the lab urgently, and to make sure that Hunyadi is there, but we don't know who that is yet, so We finally return to Gil, who is trying to leave the complex so that he can tell Jack what he found, to which we get yet another case of Jack being a dick to him, of clearly it was fine, and yet he just wants to tattle on him so Gil gets in trouble. Literally, why is the character type of being mean to your friends so popular in the 80s? It actually infuriates me. Once Gil is finally out of the sanitarium, he tells Jack what he found and what he heard all of them talking about the Hunyadi and all of this other stuff. Jack says that that is indeed very interesting and they have something there. He's gonna go on a date with Elizabeth now, though. Literally great journalism skills. You're very high. You're literally bragging about your journalistic integrity, but once you actually find a story, you decide, fuck it, I'll deal with it later. I'm gonna go on a picnic. We cut back to Lepescu and... oh my god, my brain just flatlined. We cut back to Mayor Lepescu and Inspector Perchek, who are now exhuming the body of Hunyadi to see if he is truly in his casket, to which he is not. It's a mannequin. When we once again cut back to Gil, he is running through the halls of the castle trying to catch up to Radu to follow him to wherever he might be going, since he heard that he was told to find a lab. In searching for Radu, because he loses him at a certain point, we end up seeing him come across Fejos again, and oh my god, more physical comedy. Gil eventually hits a dead end by going into a library and gets frustrated. While his back is turned, the bookcase opens and we once again get Vampire Gina Davis, the love of my life. Vampire Gina Davis's character's name is Odette, and she seems to have a weird fixation on Gil and is very, very touchy-feely with him. This seems to make him uncomfortable, but I can't tell if he's genuinely uncomfortable or if he just keeps being, like, taken off guard. It's really weird because she will get very, very touchy-feely with him and also saying she loves him and just, like, doing the literal most. When she eventually sits on his lap, he has to find a way to get around her. By the way, she ended up making a Dracula reference when wolves are howling outside and says, "Listen to the children of the night," because Vampire reference! But while she's finally distracted, he creates a fake knocking to simulate someone being at the door so that she gets off of him. And once he gets up to answer the fake door, she disappears. He gets frustrated that she's gone already so quickly, and then hears an actual knocking at the door, so he goes and opens it. Once he opens the door, he finds Fehus again. I'm just gonna assume you know exactly what I'm gonna say anytime Fehus is on this fucking screen. We finally get to Radu and Lupi, who are going to the lab that Malavakwa told them to go to. When we get there, we see a really interesting interaction that I personally just think is a really cool, like, just acting thing from Joseph Bologna. Oh, I'm immature. He basically acts initially very kind to them and trying to take care of them and just wants mutual help from them. But the instant he steps foot in his lab, he acts like a Jekyll and Hyde situation. The transformation in the physical acting is really cool to me, just the way that he will slip back and forth into it, because the way he does it is every single time he steps through the literal threshold of the lab. Once he is through that threshold, he is Hyde. But once he leaves, he's back to being Jekyll. Just the way he fluidly, physically acts through it is just really cool to me, honestly. Though this entire thing isn't actually explained in the movie, we literally have no clue why his personality changes in and out of the lab. It's just, I guess, a weird, quirky thing. I would assume in-world it has something to do with, like, something in his lab, but it's literally not explained, so I guess I just don't give a shit anymore. While Malavakwa is basically in his Hyde persona, he treats Radu and Lupe very badly. And the entire scene is basically just showing how he changes, and also just little tiny plot tidbits. We basically hear him talk about how his father was well known, but not for the right reasons. Apparently, his father's legacy is bringing herpes to Sicily? This is implied to have been, like, an accident, and he was actually trying to cure something, but in doing so, he did something bad, and I guess this is the legacy he's needing to live up to and also refute. It's weird. This entire movie is just so weird. In this scene, he also finds out that the Wolfman and Odette have escaped. But we also see him trying to interact and, like, get his lab equipment up to par, which actually led to a really stupid back and forth that I don't know why my mom and me hyperfixated on when I was a kid. In this scene, we also see that Malavakwa has a favorite monster that he works on.
Soon you'll be perfect, my favorite one. Does this hurt? Does this hurt? Does this hurt? Does this hurt? Good. Everything hurts.
Before the scene is over, we get Radu asking if he needs to wait for the lightning to happen before they can do anything, to which Malavakwa responds with, "I don't work with lightning, I work with all this other shit!" We finally cut back to Jack, however, who is on the picnic with Elizabeth, who also has Laura with her. Laura's basically just kind of fucking around, because they're in a forest, so she's just wandering around doing her own thing, I guess, and the adults aren't paying attention to her because they're great adults. And the entire time, Jack is trying to kiss her, or kiss Elizabeth, and it's just really uncomfortable, because I swear to God, if this happened today, there would be so many red flags. If I had a man sitting next to me trying to find ways to kiss me no matter how many times I would bring up a physical barrier so he couldn't, and he decides to sit there and say, like he does in the movie, "No, I'll wait," I'd punch him in the fucking face. I can tell that this was supposed to be endearing in the 80s because she does act playful about it, but, like, it's still so uncomfortable to watch. Laura eventually leaves unsupervised, and Gil shows up to tell Jack what he found with the Lady Dracula that tried to eat his face, which, again, is not what happened. Like, they try so hard to make Gil seem incompetent by just him overblowing things that actually happen directly to him, and it's wild. All of this for some reason, even though they've been seeing weird shit happening and that there's clearly a story, This just infuriates Jack, who then just goes on this whole berating him thing.
Your guts! I don't hate you. For
What are you
35
doing?
years, I've washed your
Don't
clothes.
choke me like that.
Listen to your
No.
stories. I've put up with
Wait,
your
come on.
crap.
That's too
now
tight.
that we're here, I'm going to wring your neck.
No.
'cause you're
Elizabeth!
nothing.
We cut away to Laura, who is still wandering the forest, and she ends up coming across the Frankenstein, which actually scares her, and then we cut away to once she is scared of him. The actor playing Frankenstein is played by Peter Buntick, and he is another one of the many actors who is a foreign actor, and I found, honestly, even less info about him than the other ones. Like, finding a picture of him was actually really hard, and the only thing I can think of is that he, like, was a smaller actor, but also maybe a stuntman. It was weird that I couldn't find that much info on him at all. We have finally reached the climax of the movie, and it's about to get wild as shit, so hold on. Elizabeth goes looking for Laura and is unable to find her, so she returns to the guys really panicked about not being able to find her. This actually snaps the guys out of their childish behavior, and they immediately jump up and go to help her find her, thank God. After a little bit of looking, they can't find her, so they tell Elizabeth to go to town to get the police so that they can actually help find her properly. After she leaves reluctantly, the guys remain in the forest and go in two separate directions to try to find her. We see Gil go on his own, and he eventually comes across a, like, swamp area. Side note, I actually had to look up the difference between swamps and marshes because I genuinely could not for the life of me figure out what, like, landscape this was. Considering it was filmed in Yugoslavia, I can tell this isn't a soundstage or anything. So I'm assuming this is an actual, like, forested area over there. But I, for the life of me, could not tell what it would be considered. So if you are from the area or just literally know anything about geography, let me know what you think this area might be considered. Gil ends up climbing up a tree to see if he could see her from a higher ground, and as he climbs back down, he ends up literally on top of Frankenstein, which makes him start, like, panicking in a way that he's crying, but also looks like he's laughing. It was just a really weird acting scene to me, honestly. I don't know what Ed Begley Jr. was told for this. While panicking, he backs up into the water, and once he's in it, a hand reaches up and grabs his junk, which makes him panic more and runs off. We then cut back to Jack, who is searching on his own, and he ends up coming across some bushes that are making more animalistic sounds again, so he just assumes it's the same guy as last time and is about to try and bypass it. But before he can, the actual Wolfman pops up and starts fucking with him. The Wolfman starts trying to attack him, and in retaliation, Gil has already come to find him and jumps on the Wolfman's back to try and save Jack. But this doesn't work and just leads the Wolfman to run off with Gil on his back. Jack is very visibly shaken, and before he can do anything, the Mayor Lepescu and Inspector Perchek, as well as other police officers, have already shown up, apparently for unrelated reasons other than Laura, and he tries to tell them what happened. They basically brush him off and say that the wine festival is going to go on as normal. And once he says that there is a literal child lost in the woods, why are you not doing anything about it? Perchek has him arrested for meddling in police affairs. Once he is taken away, Lepescu asks if they should actually do something about, a girl that's missing, and Perchek gets very defensive and says, basically,
when we were children, the streets echoed with cries of Frankenstein!
Wait, did he say when we were kids? Can we roll that back again to make sure I heard that correctly?
When we were children.
Yeah, he just said when they were kids that this all happened. I had to look up each actor's ages. At the time of film's release, Bozidar was 49 and Jeffrey Jones was 39. That is a decade gap. No one with a decade gap grew up together interacting with each other in a way that they can say something like that. That is the weirdest implication that they're trying to shoehorn in. Are they trying to say that Jeffrey Jones is older than he is? What is happening? We get back to the lab. Malavakwa, Radu, Lupi, Wolfman, and Gil are now all in the same room. The Wolfman keeps yelling, which is clearly pissing Malavakwa off, so he yells back, which actually makes Wolfman stop and just stand there like the Robert Pattinson meme, which is actually really fucking funny to watch. Malavakwa asks why he brought him to the lab in the first place, and so he tells him he couldn't get him off his back. Well, why were you out there in the first place? I had to take a whiz. Whatever, dude. Whatever. Malavakwa gets increasingly annoyed about the entire situation, and he even asks why he attacked Jack in the first place, to which he responds that he scared him. Which makes him even more upset, because how the fuck would Jeff Goldblum scare a Wolfman? He has Radu and Lupi put him in his cage, to which he makes a joke saying, "Hey Doc, I think I like the pound better." This movie sucks. The Wolfman, by the way, is played by Donald Gibb, who looks like he's in a lot of just really random stuff and is one of the few American actors in this movie. A new guy walks in and looks like he might be a professional contortionist or something, unless they used really good effects, and was just told to stand in the most uncomfortable position possible, and it's so fucking weird. He is played by a Serbian actor named Doško Varantic, who was actually a very pleasant surprise in my research, because compared to everyone else, he was a lot easier to at least find some info on. In fact, including the fact that he actually has an Instagram, which I thought was kind of neat. Though they didn't even remotely take good care of his character compared to everyone else, considering finding a credit for him on like Wikipedia wasn't existent, and on IMDb they only credit him as Twisted Man because his character looks like a contortionist. Why?
How come you grabbed this reporter by the cojones?
He stepped on me.
But I'm sorry. I have to look at the footage here. Why was he able to step on you? Literally, in the footage, you can see that he walks into the water. He is at the edge of the water. Nothing is there when he walks into it. And right here is when he grabs him, which implies he was already under the water before he even grabbed him. Why were you in the water like that? Anyway, the doctor makes fun of him for this, and then there's just so much chaos happening with so much noise, so much talking, just so much stuff happening. Odette randomly appears and is very, very loosely chained to a wall and goes over to Gil and begs him to not hurt him because she loves him, to which he also makes fun of because and basically just calls her a nymphomaniac, which, okay. I feel like this movie's taking life expectancy away from me. He basically tells everyone in the lab that the police are breathing down his neck and that no one can leave right now. And he also tells Radu and Lupi to go find Hunyadi, who is the one that is apparently Frankenstein. Frankenstein is Hunyadi. We cut away and we see Jack is in a jail cell with one of the Transylvanians just sitting at a desk and making jokes at him, and even repeats the "till the cows come home" joke from earlier for some fucking reason. But he eventually is released because of the fact that Elizabeth shows up and breaks a bottle over the guard's head and then releases him and asks why no one's doing anything. So Jack has to tell her, "We're at the wine festival," which is very upsetting for her, and honestly, I don't blame her. They apparently split up because the next thing we see after they both leave the jail is Jack going back to Madame Morovia to ask what he should do next. She explains that the previous Wolfman they had tried confronting is her husband, Larry, and that he is a wolf. And I'm guessing that she just means because he sleeps around, I guess. But her son is a wolf man. I don't know why there's a difference in wording, but whatever, let's roll with it. But she does tell him how to find the lab, so he goes to try and find and rescue Laura. We cut back to Hunyadi and Laura, who are hiding out in a barn for some fucking reason and playing cards, and the interaction is actually really adorable. And I know she doesn't say much in this scene, but considering they had to phonetically teach her lines, I wouldn't have guessed that she didn't speak English, honestly.
Full house.
Radu and Lupi show up and try to drug Hunyadi from behind so that they can take him away, and it leads to the longest fucking scene in the world. But in the end, they manage to knock him out, and so they put him on a hay tractor. That's the word. They put him on a tractor with hay on it and Laura on there so they can drive away. Jack finally arrives at the lab and gets inside, and when he sees Gil is still alive and well, he goes to try and save him. And he actually seems genuinely happy that he's alive, which is shocking for his character. Though Gil finally becomes conscious again and mentions that this is gonna be one hell of a story for his dad. Jack tries to ask where Laura is, and it just leads to a whole entire long scene again, a physical comedy, and I am so exasperated. The whole entire scene is just so chaotic. There's so many noises and talking and moving, and there's so much. But during the debacle, Jack ends up getting, I guess, caught by Wolfman, who was like grabbing him from through his cage bars, and the only reason he escapes is because he pulls a hair off of his pinky, which makes him cry like a baby. The Wolfman also calls him a communist for some fucking reason. It was so weird. Jack and Malavakwa now have their own physical comedy, which is basically just Jack finally hearing that he needs to take him out of the lab, so he does. And so we get this back and forth like from earlier, except this time with a physical wrestling thing. Once he is finally out of his lab and not accidentally thrusted back into it, Malavakwa explains that Hunyadi had never intended to actually hurt Laura. He had just seen her wandering around the forest and was concerned and wanted to take her back to her mother. However, the instant Lupi shows up with Laura to prove that Laura is safe, Hunyadi breaks out, takes Laura, and leaves, which Malavakwa has to say, she's fine, he's just trying to take her to her mother. This leads to a very, very chaotically edited scene that cuts between 3 different things happening of Hunyadi and Laura having a cute little interaction while he's trying to carry her to the wine festival where her mom is. We see the wine festival where people are just vibing to another different rendition of Pennsylvania 6-5000. And several different people at the lab getting ready to go to head to the wine festival after Jack and Malavakwa and Gil have already left to go. Before Hunyadi and Laura reach the festival, Laura gets very tired and tells him this, and so she ends up falling asleep in his arms. However, he is very stiff, so even though he seems very sympathetic to that, he can't hold her like you normally would when a kid falls asleep in your arms. So she ends up laying lifeless in them. So by the time that they show up, it looks like he's carrying a dead child. During this whole debacle and in the back and forth, Elizabeth has already showed up and was confronting Lepesky and Perchek to try and ask what they're doing to save her daughter, to which case they just brush her off like everything's fine, which it's clearly not. But while she's finally there, Hunyadi shows up and lays Laura down on the ground, and everyone freaks out because they think Frankenstein just showed up with a dead child. Elizabeth moves past the crowd to get to Laura and lifts her up, which wakes Laura up and shows that she's perfectly fine. But Elizabeth is still terrified of Hunyadi, so while Laura's in her arms, she starts backing up back into the crowd, while Perchek incites a mob. He tries to get townsfolk and police officers to attack Hunyadi, but he is a very strong, tall man, so basically does nothing. This leads Perchek to say that fire will help their situation, and tells them to pull out the torches, which literally everyone randomly does at some point, and there are so many torches in people's hands that, like, where did they get these from? He literally acts like the town is not prepared for a situation like this, but clearly they are, because they literally just have torches on hand. By the time that Malavakwa, Gil, and Jack show up to the wine festival, they already have Hunyadi on a funeral pyre. They go up to it and try to disrupt everything happening, and all it does is lead to Perchek trying to villainize Malavakwa and say how he is a disgraced doctor and he does not know what he's talking about. There's a huge scuffle before Elizabeth ends up grabbing a wine bottle and doing exactly what she was made a joke of earlier by breaking a bottle over a man's head and using it to try and defend the situation so that they can speak. They literally frame her, like, cinematography-wise, like a crazy woman, and I am so exasperated by it. Okay, so here's where the movie gets very weird and exposition dumpy, so try to follow along the best you can. At this part of the movie, I guess just in order to save myself a good explanation, they basically debunk every single Universal monster that they have showed so far, and giving a grounded explanation as to who and what they actually are. I'm also gonna just, as a heads up, every single time there is an explanation for someone, there is a back and forth with Perchek trying to discredit him and make him look crazy. So pretend that I am constantly saying the back and forth, because I really don't want to. It's exasperating, and Perchek actually infuriates me at a certain point, because he's literally trying to make them seem like the bad guys. Frankenstein is explained to be a man named Hunyadi. Hunyadi had gotten mangled in a car accident and was left paralyzed. He was trying to help him, but he ended up just doing too much, and Perchek revoked his funding and completely took away his doctor's license and made him work at the sanitarium, where Hunyadi also got transferred. He also revealed that all of the money that was supposed to go to actually helping people was funneled through the sanitarium and also used to funnel into the mayor and the police's pockets. Also, during the whole thing, at least for the Frankenstein portion, not the rest of it, but at least for the Frankenstein portion, Gil is doing this fucking bit in the crowd that reminds me of a thing Roger from American Dad would do, of constantly changing costumes and popping up in random parts of the crowd to try and get the crowd on their side, which ends up leading to him getting confused at himself and inciting the mob all over again. He does his best, and even Jack says he gets confused. The monsters finally arrive in their cart and ends up just creating a whole new scuffle. The Wolfman turns out to be a man named Larry Malbit, who is the son of the fortune teller woman and the director who had a weird cameo in his own movie. He has a genetic condition that made him uncontrollably grow hair that he could not maintain. Madame Morovia was so ashamed of him, and considering how old she is, she probably didn't know how to handle it, so she started villainizing her son and spreading lies about him. Malavacqua was treating him with electrolysis, which is basically just laser hair removal that a lot of other people get nowadays. And it was actually starting to work, and his belly is actually starting to not have hair all over. His section ends with Madame Morovia showing up, apologizing for what she had done, and him hugging her and saying, "You stink." The next to be revealed is the mummy that had been revealed in his lab scenes and scenes and scenes ago that was his favorite. They take her out of her coffin and unwrap her and reveal that she was actually popular in the town, but not for good reasons. She was a woman revealed to be named Ugly Hattie, who everyone thought she was disgusting looking, even herself. Apparently everyone thought she was so ugly that she took it upon herself to go to Malavacqua, who was doing extensive plastic surgery to actually make her look how she would like. And that was why she was wrapped up and in a coffin, was because she needed a high-end oxygen environment. Once she is fully revealed, she looks down at herself and mentions how happy she is with herself now. The woman that plays Ugly Hattie is played by another Croatian actress named Ksenia Prohaska, and her crediting also infuriates me. They literally say her name is Hattie. They could have even said Ugly Hattie in the credits. I don't give a shit, but they don't. The credits just call her Mummy. They just call her Mummy. Even though they gave her a name, but they still decided to not fucking use it. What? These filmmakers? Oh. The only other people that are explained are Radu and Lupi. This is where Perchek starts getting a little more frustrating as a character. I mean, he already was. Basically, he starts insulting Radu and Lupi and even coaxes out their son, who also is hunched over, and is basically saying how disgusting it is that they have been allowed to breed. Hearing all of this actually makes Radu angry and finally says how they're not hunchbacks. They've just been broken down so emotionally and physically by the people they have to call master that they started physically lowering themselves for other people. He even starts treating his wife a lot kinder in this moment because he realizes how it sounds when people are shitting on her. So because of this, Lupi tells her son to stand up straight. And so all three of them together stand up straight and prove Perchek wrong, that they're not even fucking hunchbacks. Perchek finally loses the crowd, obviously, and him along with Lupescu just kind of disappear into the void, I guess, of filmmaking. The wine festival starts back up, including the music, like, I guess people just decided, oh, it's party time now. Jack and Elizabeth have a moment and they bond, I guess, and decide to get together. At bare minimum, they kiss, and it's annoying as shit. Gil goes to talk to Odette, who again, I guess she is another one that gets explained. I guess Twisted Man is the only one that doesn't genuinely get explained. Along with Malavacqua. But Gil goes up to Odette and tries to talk to her because she's hiding in the carriage. She tries to come on to him again, but he tells her, let's get rid of these fangs, and helps her take the fake fangs out of her mouth. Apparently she portrays herself as a vampire because she feels like it's the only way she can actually get attention from other people, especially men. She acts like she is ugly and this is the only way that she can get attention, and when he tries to say that she's beautiful, Malavacqua pops up and says that he gave her a nose job, which is the whole reason why she thought she was ugly, which is so fucked up. It's Gina Davis. Don't try to say Gina Davis is ugly in any capacity, goddammit. Gil gives her a small kiss and they agree to go dance. Gil gives her a small kiss and they all go out to dance with everyone else. And Gil and Jack agree that this is going to be one hell of a story, so Gil takes pictures of the entire rest of the wine festival to prove that monsters exist but don't. I don't know what the whole point of that was. Another version of the theme song plays, and we, before the credits, get newspaper articles of some of the characters and what they're up to now, I guess. This movie was bad, like, really frustratingly bad. I kept feeling myself just getting aggravated as I kept watching it, with very rare moments of humor that actually made me laugh or even just chuckle a little bit. It's really frustrating because the concept of this movie is actually really fascinating, especially considering Universal monsters as a story have not gone away since 1985 when this movie was released. We have made so many more movies just based off of Universal monsters that making a movie about how they're not actually monsters actually seems like a really cool concept. But it's just riddled with so much physical comedy that is usually just bad, romantic subplots that actually just feel predatory and gross. The research made me just exasperated and frustrated when I saw that the fucking foreign actors that weren't well documented. Before watching this movie again for the first time in years, I actually decided to ask a lot of my friends if they've even heard of this movie.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of Transylvania 65000?
No. What is it?
It's garbage.
That sounds, not good.
This is a comedy.
Does not sound like a comedy.
And I have to talk about this piece of shit.
Oh my god. I don't envy you at all.
And it was mostly an overwhelming no. There was only maybe a couple people who had, and the only one that said that they did said that he watched it while immensely intoxicated. But considering how much bad comedy was in this movie, let's revisit those counters. Let's see, we have 9 bad physical comedy jokes, 5 good physical comedy jokes, 3 times that Gil trusts Jack when he really shouldn't have. That is so bad. It's so bad. Before we go, I really wanted to look at some of the reviews that I thought were actually really funny, just because one of my favorite things to do nowadays are look at Letterboxd reviews, because some of them are just gems. I wish Kramer harassed me in a monster-themed hotel with goofs and gags. God, who wants that? Kind of like Rocky Horror for straight people, but worth watching if you like Gina Davis and Jeff Goldblum. Yeah, it does feel like fucking Rocky for straight people. That's wild to think about. Yo, Kramer is in this? Gina Davis hot, 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 Gina Davis hot. This was in the same realm of like Earth Girls Are Easy, campy movie, silly plot, Gina Davis, and Jeff Goldblum hot! I like Gina Davis is just playing horny vampire. Yeah. No. If only they knew the real monsters were Jeffrey Jones and Michael Richards. Oh. Loved this as a kid. Probably just horny for Gina Davis. Yeah, same. This could have slayed if Gina Davis Vampirella was the main character, and also if the film was better. This is a bad movie, but Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis. What the fuck is the door answering puppet about? This fucking sucked the life out of me. Yeah, me too, honestly. Before I go, I want to show a really funny tags that are on IMDb for this movie for some reason. It was the unfortunate reason on why I found out Jeffrey Jones is a garbage human being, so that's fun. That Dad from Mom and Dad Save the World sucks. I think I only liked this movie, even remotely when I was a kid, because I was gay for Gina Davis, which seems to be the consensus for a lot of people. So, stay safe, be wary of sexy vampire women and grumpy wolfmen. Have a safe night.